Welcome to Making Room, a podcast inspiring people to accelerate change by being a catalyst, honoring creativity, and acting with courage. We are making room for the greatest potential of our community.
Welcome, you are welcome here. Welcome to this open door, dear. Our hands are reaching out for you. The floor is clear, and we've made room for you.
Well, here we are. It's wonderful. It's a Monday morning. Get to see y'all's beautiful faces. How's everybody doing this morning?
Pretty good.
Doing
Good
great.
morning, John.
Doing great.
Good morning, Brennan.
morning.
We're talking about, we just had a chance to talk a little about art over the weekend from your daughter, Brandon, and that, I know that'll be one of our themes of creativity and the term catalyst, Shivani. I know that one meant a lot to you when we got started and courage. And I tell you what, it is great to finally be here. We've had so many conversations, and y'all are such great friends, and it's just exciting that we're making room, the theme of our podcast, for each other to have some really meaningful conversations. So I'd love to just start first off with, I guess people want to know how do we know each other, right? How does a doctor,
Who
a
are
these
lawyer,
people?
and this entrepreneur, and Shivani, I guess I'll start with you. Thinking back, it might have been the first time we moved to South End, right? And,
We did.
and
We-
showed up in that apartment next to you.
Brand new apartment complex. We were the first couple people to be moving in, and lo and behold, the same exact Mazda 3 cars, just slightly different colors. And you ended up being our neighbor, and turns out you were a great friend and showed up at our doorstep sometimes around dinner time. Yeah.
Coincidentally.
Coincidentally,
Hey,
perhaps.
we got some serious food next door. I'm living on my own. It's just, hey, how you guys doing? Oh, John, would you like to come in? Oh, I wasn't even thinking that. But it was a lot of strategic
But it's been
thinking.
a great friendship. I mean, you and my husband are so similar in so many ways, and I think that's what sparked the conversation, and here we are.
Yeah.
And now you're Uncle Johnny to my kids.
Yeah, that's true. That is true, which means sometimes I get to take care of plants when you're away.
You get homework assignments.
I get homework assignments. Sahana keeps me in line.
She sure
so.
does.
We won't ask for your grades.
To be determined still, to be determined.
Oh, I did get a couple of reminders. So, and Brandon, we probably met similarly around that time, right?
Yeah, I think we used to be part of or we are still part of a group, but we used to meet next door to Shivani's. So we're part of a group of 14 guys, and we need to broaden our diversity, but the idea was 7 black guys, 7 white guys, and this was before even sort of the racial tension that we're experiencing now. It's just we want to get together and we want to have honest conversations, ask the dumb questions, the tough questions. We may argue and get pretty heated in the room, which we sometimes do, but we always leave as friends. And it's been, Shivani mentions Uncle Johnny. It's been great because now our wives get together, our kids get together, and we just have this great group that we very rarely intentionally talk about race, but we all know where the perspectives of other people are coming from. So it's been great. And then Shivani, we've had a chance to get to know her and her husband, and our spouses met recently, and they said they're going to have a rival podcast.
They did. They had
They're
a
plotting
spouse's
that.
rival
On this.
podcast.
They're applauding on this, so it's just been great to get to know you all. So
I love it. I tell you what, y'all's spouses have some serious creative talent.
They sure
Kirby
do.
and her dancing, and Pottis can sing. I love that. Well, we're gonna have that more work for Brian here in Queen City Podcast. So I love that. Well, and it occurred to me too that yes, right, we did have similar cars, and that one day is that these things haven't, us getting connected, has happened for a reason. And right. I think when we talk about these 3 concepts, we decided to focus on really being a catalyst and sometimes stepping back so others can step forward, and creativity to really honor the way people see the world, and courage that we can do hard things together. I felt like it was natural that when we started talking about what are our themes, that the 3 of us really got connected based on those things. And I've seen it over and over, Shivani and you, and just how you've been responding during the pandemic as a physician, and Brandon, years and years, just how you've served the community. And I think that's part of why we became closer and closer as friends, is because we were we were having these conversations all the time and said, well, why not create a podcast here? And so it's fun to be here and to get rocking and rolling today and start interviewing some guests here over the next couple months. So I thought maybe we would just start there and Shivani, and this idea of a catalyst, which I think is such a cool word, because when I first heard it, it was also kind of counterintuitive to what we think about in leadership and change. So I'd love to kind of hear more about what that word means to you and any story you might have around who was that for you, or particularly in your life or career.
Sure, yeah. So I love that I get the word catalyst because I'm such a science nerd, and the doctor in the group. So I go back to the scientific explanation of a catalyst, and it's really a substance that causes or accelerates a reaction without actually being affected itself. So it basically decreases the amount of energy that it takes for something to happen. And the cool thing is that the catalyst doesn't change, right? It doesn't take away anything from a catalyst. So in science, you're talking about chemical reactions and things like that, but in real life with people, it could be a person, it could be a situation that moves and creates momentum for a new opportunity for somebody, or a space, making room for somebody. And it doesn't take away from anything. So you could be just a person saying, hey, here's the floor, go for it, right? Or it's somebody stepping back or stepping forward, and it doesn't change anything for that person in the sense that they didn't lose anything. They might have gained.
That's awesome. And
That's right.
I see why you said, it's such a shift in how you think about it, because you think about catalysts, and maybe it's the scientific nature of it. You just think it's so much more complex, but it's very simple. It's not a monumental shift in sort of how to do something. And I think a lot of times people feel there's some daunting challenge that they have to do something monumental to change, and it can be something small that sort of shifts the movement. And you think about people in your life who have said certain things, and it could be one sentence, but that sticks with you and changes you for the rest of your life, and that's what being a catalyst. So I love that definition.
Absolutely. And the other thing I like is that it's not that the reaction or the change wasn't going to happen anyway. It's just that the catalyst made it move faster or made it happen in an easier way for that person or for that chemical reaction. I think about it even for my own self. After residency, I was super passionate about advocacy and community health, and I kept saying it over and over again, and everyone knew that was my thing. And then one colleague moved down from New York, and she started talking, and she was saying things that I totally jived with, and she was in a leadership position. And so I met with her, and I talked with her, and she said, okay, come on board, right? She created space and time for me in a position to be able to join in that work and teaching our residents about advocacy. And that was all it took. And now I've just kind of domino effect. I get more and more opportunities. But it was because she was able to say, hey, I have some time and space. Let's do this.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and just that she saw that potential in you, and then also wanted to say, okay, I'm going to invest in you. And I think that's part of what is so important as we talk about really how we can accelerate community change together, is that it does take an investment, but the rewards and the kind of things that we can do together. I just finished up a 2-day retreat on a new project I've been working on called Reimagining Schools, and it was so exciting. We actually we started at a school called Performance Learning Center, and working with students as co-facilitators, one of which we're going to get a chance to interview, and creative entrepreneurs to give students a variety of ways to express how do they want their public school experience to be. And I was really struck because we had 2 high school students from Harding. One of the PLC students said, when he was speaking, "You're my spirit animal," and got excited that a peer was up there, and there was something that when we made room for Franklin in particular to be in that room, it actually got another student more engaged because they saw something in themselves in him. And I was just really struck by that, where I think sometimes in our community, we're so afraid to open up power structures. We're so afraid to the resources are abundant here. And if we just sort of let go a little bit, that to your point, things might happen quicker. You know?
Yeah. Right. And to your point also with that particular group, right, to be able to do that for people who are young, who don't always have a platform and don't always have a voice, they don't vote.
Yeah.
So when you're able to do that, and they have creative, amazing ideas that come out of it.
That's right.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear just with Brandon for you, just somebody that we don't know about in the community who's maybe a different voice, who lately you've been really, you meet with so many people. I think of you as like the connectivity guy, but who's someone that maybe we don't know about, whether it's a named person or just a perspective you've heard recently that really has just inspired you in a different way?
Yeah, and I'll actually touch on creativity as part of this too, because it actually happened. So John had a monumental birthday recently. I won't say which number.
Oh, we can tell
He's
him.
an old guy.
Are we going to
birthdays.
sing?
No.
Happy birthday.
No.
Okay, that was the Stevie version.
Yeah.
Y'all
We
saw
won't
that.
sing. We won't sing. But anyway, so at your birthday party, I was standing around there with a group of creatives, and one who will be on this podcast soon, Michaela Benter, and just sort of really enjoyed talking with her and her plus one. And it was just so different than everything that sort of I talk about on a daily basis, and just the creativity, the things she's doing, the bridging the different communities. And so I love that creativity is one of our themes and concepts here.
Yeah. Well, and I think what I've noticed, having known her as well, is that there's just a variety of ways people also express what they want and what we need in terms of change in the community. And we found that out with the students last week. It was so cool. We broke out when we said, what do you want? What are the things that would be really meaningful to you? We had Nate Sally, who's a coach, but also a rapper and I'll call him a lyrical genius. He's a poet. And so we had a group that said, why don't you express what you want lyrically? And then we had 3 canvases and said, why don't you express what you want through drawing, through painting a picture? And then another group that I think often gets missed, which is, here's a group that we want you to have a chance to write things down, but by yourself in a quiet environment that maybe speaking isn't, how you express. And every student chose something, and they said that, and that's part of, I think, what we're talking about on this podcast with creativity, is that there's just different ways of seeing the world. And the more we make room to open up the ways people do that, that was what I was so excited about. And I think for what we are here is that we can open that up across communities and how people see the world.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
two quick things on creativity, right? So when I was, it's weird. I think the catalyst makes sense for Shivani to cover as the physician, but for me as a lawyer, covering creativity seems like, what? The head scratcher. But when I grew up as a kid, I really wanted to be an artist, and I was told, you can't be an artist, you can't be a creative, you can't pay the bills on that. And so I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and went on and did something more practical with business and law, which you can't get more practical than that. And then I realized, we stepped out into the financial crisis, now COVID pandemic, and realized that I really needed that creativity that I had as a kid to help address some of these problems. And also, one point that you mentioned was creativity is a way of expressing for people who may not be able to connect otherwise, right? So I remember being in, as you mentioned, part of my community work. I'm on the board of the Beckler Museum, and they have this really great program of where they go into juvenile detention centers, Jail North right here in Charlotte, and they teach these young kids who've maybe made bad decisions how to express themselves through art. And at first I was like, what is this program? Like, shouldn't they be doing all these other things? There's plenty of things on the list before we get to art. But then when I actually went, and I went with other leaders in Charlotte, I couldn't think of any other place where I would see these executives connecting with these kids who are in juvenile detention.
It's incredible.
And it was just through art. And so that is really the power of creativity, and that's what we need to bridge both of all the different divides we have in our community, and also address challenging problems that none of us really have the answer to.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's just that it's like I think it can be this vehicle that can accelerate but change, but also like create a common ground for people, and I think even as Shivani, when we first got to know each other, you and Padas, that food, right? Food was a form of, I know, something that renews you, and I'd love to hear about that, having having been a physician, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and
Sure.
what does what is food and mixing flavors? How is that a part that creates not only connectivity but healing? I think that's the other part, Brandon, we talked about before, and Shivani is. It's also this healing part. Like sometimes getting connected to somebody is also it's rejuvenating to the soul, and I was just love to hear about that. And then maybe we could also sometime record a podcast over a meal.
Of course, I would love a cooking dinner podcast. It'd be amazing. No, I totally agree. I think, certainly at the very beginning of this pandemic, I found myself needing to do something to relieve stress, right? There's all these unanswered questions. We had no idea what the roadmap was going to be. And I definitely agree, Brendan, that, creativity played a huge role in making us come up with solutions that we never had to think of before. But I found myself needing to create. So I would be stressed out at home and needing to do something with my hands to create some type of product, because if I didn't know what I was doing. And so I was in the kitchen and I was cooking. And I know a lot of people were in the kitchen cooking and, making sourdough bread and banana bread and all sorts of things they've never made before. But it felt so good to be able to mix flavors, rehack, recipes I've done before and make them healthier. We're vegetarian at our house. So taking recipes that everybody else was doing that might have had a meat and saying, how can I do this vegetarian style as well? I also doodle, which I don't think you know that yet.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
I love to do Indian design, henna
that's
designs
awesome.
on paper. So I was doodling, I was creating
She
meals.
loves Post-its too.
I do love Post-its.
She has a lot of Post-its right now. No doodles, though.
No doodles. They'll come. It's like a stress reliever. But yeah, so, being able to do that and, before the pandemic and as we move out of it as well, I love feeding people. John, and Brandon, we'll have you over.
I don't know yet.
Oh,
I don't know yet.
that hurts. Wow,
It's because we got together during a pandemic. I was following all the rules.
Okay. Fair enough.
But now that we're vaccinated and people are being able to create more space, I would happily like to have you and Kirby over for
That'd
dinner.
be great.
And John, you can come too.
Yes.
You're going to entertain the kids, though, I think.
Yeah.
That's right.
Babysitter.
Babysitter.
Well, since you all have done that for me, right?
Yes, Uncle on call.
Uncle. Yes, I will take care of all the kids, and maybe we will. I'll tell you what, we're going to paint the driveway.
There you go. See, some
With chalk.
creativity.
With chalk. Okay.
I'll allow it. And, I love what you said about your kind of childhood experience, because I do think, all of us have some type of creativity inherent in us. Right? You give kids any box of materials and they come up with stuff, and then over time we might stifle it and be practical and logical and do all the things that we need to do, but it's in there, whether it's you actually doing it or appreciating it and sharing that over time. I love the voice that is able to offer.
Yeah, I agree. Great. So speaking of kids and bringing that creativity out, and you being volunteering for babysitting, I have to say that takes courage.
It's
So I think you got to go
amazing.
try
It does take
There comes some courage. I don't think you know what
I
you're in
just
for.
need lots of activities.
I don't think you know what you're in for. But I will say, John, I think probably over the last year, and you asked me about someone's voice I heard, when I think about it with respect to creativity, when I think about courage, I think of very few people who made the courageous step of you. And in a year where there's so many who showed courage, right, from our healthcare partners, Shivani and others who rushed in when others went home and socially distanced. But talk a little bit about courage for you, especially over the last year.
Yeah, no, it's just a word. I love that word because I remember the first time that it just really struck a chord with me on what it meant. And we were back when I was at the Center for Intentional Leadership, and we had started something called Intentional Movement. We were doing some different hikes outside, and how could being outside really be this vehicle for change as well? Because we tend to shy away sometimes through all the being inside structures, that outside is such an amazing way to be creative, and we're kind of born to be running and moving around. And so we had this climbing guide come down. His name's Christian Santelices, and he's been all over the world and climbed the Tetons and Himalayas and all kinds of places. And we were asking him, thinking, okay, well, this guy has summited some of the highest peaks in the world. He's been everywhere. And I remember asking him, what does courage mean? And who are the most courageous people? And we thought we had no idea what answer we get. He goes, some people think it's the person who just jumps off a building and hang glides, or will just try any mountain peak. And those aren't the people that are the most courageous to me. They're the ones that they will try something even when it's really hard. Mm-hmm. And we heard a really beautiful story from our producer here, Brian, about some things he tried as a young man. And I got moved hearing about that, because to me that's courage.
Right.
It's putting yourself in those tough situations. And this past year was a really tough situation for me, because I was in a transition part of an 8-year career at a leadership development firm that I loved, and a great group of people. But as you and I talked about, and the three of us have many times, there was something deeper inside me emerging. And I'm one of those people that it's tough, right, to sometimes to make that leap. But if you're around really great people like the two of you, were just helped, the word courage actually you can see the word in it, and encourage. And I got a lot of encouragement from both of you. I remember in particular when you said, I think you're trying to fit your purpose into something, and that there's a broader platform out there for you and for what you want to create. So those to me are the different, and I think there's lots of forms of courage. And Shivani, we've talked some about that. It's not always taking that big step or being person out in front, but there's great courage in standing with someone. And I'd love to hear a little more about that, what that means to you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I totally see when people are able to step forward and like take that risk for themselves, but sometimes it's standing by somebody else who takes that leap and takes that courage themselves to take a stand, speak up in a room where it might be uncomfortable, and say, hey, I see you. I get you, I hear you, I support you, and I'm here for whatever you need. And sometimes if the situation or the scenario is a little bit controversial, we don't always do that, right?
Yeah.
And so whether that's COVID or racial injustice or just uncomfortable conversations, being able to like really stand with somebody and recognize them. And oftentimes that creates momentum, right? You do it, someone then sees your courage, and they're encouraged to then also step forward and say something.
That's a great point. And I think the key with all these concepts is maybe you don't have all the things you have. Maybe you don't have courage in a particular moment. But when you see someone who is a creative, you see someone who is a catalyst, how are you supporting them? And you see someone who's willing to make the courageous step. Now, Shivani, I'll tell you, so we had a conversation, John, and I did tell him he was trying to shoehorn his purpose into a job. I did not know he was going to quit said job.
Oh, that was not the intention of that conversation.
That was not the intention.
I did it. Whoa.
And John, we're standing by you with henceforth podcast.
Well, I mean, and that was a perfect example. Like, that was a courageous step that I probably could not have taken in that moment. But when he did it, I was like, okay, man, you've done this. Let's figure out, where's your path? Where's your purpose? How do we make it work? And I think where I found rewarded of this past year is sort of where you come now with sort of all the things you're doing. And I had the chance to meet your mom for the first time a few weeks ago. And she knew me. Like, she gave me a hug. And I was like, it's like we'd known each other for all the time. Like, grew up as childhood friends. And she was, my second mom. And I really loved that. And I think part of it was she knew kind of our story and sort of just embracing your courage. And I think she appreciated that. So it's just really powerful, man.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And that, I tell you what, it meant a lot to have everybody there that night to celebrate. And I remember that because you start to talk about people who have really, been a part of your journey. And I think that was what I think is so meaningful about this is y'all know for me that there's that quote from the founder of Patagonia said, how you climb the mountain is more important than reaching the top.
Right.
And for me personally, like there's no two other people I'd rather climb with than y'all. And so you having the conversation with my mom and same with you, Shivani and Padas, are like, okay, these are the people that I feel like have gotten me through a difficult but also rewarding transition period. And I think as we go forward in this podcast I want to normalize that too, that change can be hard, but it's really meaningful. Right. Loss is hard, grief is hard, but it's also beautiful that you have loved somebody that much in your life. Mm-hmm. And, I had a friend who lost a close family member yesterday, and we were talking about that. And so us being able to, with all these core concepts, but one that sort of runs through them all is humanity, and that we're all human beings and we're tied to each other's both joy and difficulties. And I just think navigating life, and if we can continue to create a community together where we're just really, we believe in each other, we're for each other, we're honest when things aren't happening, but there's less of this, I'll call it, shame and public, all this stuff that happens, and we kind of wrap ourselves around if someone needs resources or if someone just needs a chance, right? I think that's what I felt most about working with students this past week is, to your point, Shiv, is like they just needed a chance. They just wanted somebody to hear them. And I was struck by the two things they said most leading up to it, is that a lot of times we don't feel valued and we don't feel heard. So just the space to say what they want, like there was something, therapeutic in that. And I think as we go forward together, that's kind of be the focus is sometimes, we'll have a chance, just the three of us kicking it here, and maybe it's just a couple of us sometimes, but we're also going to have some really exciting guests and thinking about how these concepts might apply to their own life and their leadership on, being a catalyst, being courageous and creative. Who knows? We're going to have surprises. We got some cool stuff happening with a musical collaboration. And, as we close out today and think about next, just curious from y'all, what are you excited about, related to where we go forward?
Well, I know for sure I am super excited to have these amazing guests join us and be able to hear their inspiring stories. I think, John, your party was a classic example of just this amazing group of diverse people from all walks of life. And it's a total testament to how you can just draw things out of people and ask questions and hear stories. There was a person from a deli who happened to be a photographer you created space for her to be a photographer. There was a musician. There were people that were serving drinks, but it was literally just people because you interact with them and you ask the questions and you bring them in and create space and you have the most amazing, fascinating group of friends that we really enjoy. So I love to be able to share that with our listeners as well, of just fascinating voices, more unlikely stories, people who join us and be able to share about how that might impact our community as well when we allow them to speak, make room for them.
Yeah, that was great. I had to follow that. No, I will say I'll take a different angle. I just like the concept of making room. So when I was younger, lived in my parents' house, I would sprawl out on the sofa, and we had this saying that my mom or my dad would come in and say, "Hey, sit like you got a family." And what that meant was make room for other people to sit down, and just tying this concept of family with making room. And I think about what Shiv said. It's really like how we've sort of become a family, how we as a community become more family-like, and seeing people, your family, they do stuff, they say stuff you may not like all the time, but you still love them at the end of the day. You still do what you need to do to make room for them at your table. And so I really like using these concepts as kind of a roadmap to bring people together and to also help us address some of our issues around making room in this community and connecting over divides. So I'm really looking forward to that and our great guests as well.
Yeah, and I love that because, like even being on the couch, right? Like, okay, I can't take the whole thing up.
That's right. I would try.
But when that happens, I think in our minds, it can be, wow, I got to make a sacrifice, right? And we've talked about that. But in doing that, all of a sudden someone close to you has space too, and then you might walk away with a conversation or a connection you weren't expecting. And I think that's this idea is that when we talk about making room, when you make room as an individual, if you take the first step, it's likely that opportunity or access or whatever it is you created, it's going to make room for your own growth. And so there's this two-way street of this exchange of value, and that's the part I'm excited to learn from y'all, to learn from our guests, and just have our hearts and minds continue to grow and have more capacity for what we're able to do. And so it's going to be fun. We're going to have some great conversations. We'll probably laugh. We got to make fun of each other just a little bit. Just a little bit.
You keep singing, we will
I
make fun of you.
The microphone is not for singing, John.
I just need someone to make room for an album that I need to record. That really is it.
That doesn't fit our definition of catalyst.
Yes. That might take away.
Yeah, it might
some
take away,
energy.
detract from
Take away.
Just kidding, John.
Just kidding.
We'll
make
let you
room
practice.
for it.
Well, we may not be in some of the first few episodes, but we do. I'm excited for people to hear about the musical collaboration we're working on and the song, and for us, just you listening means a lot, and showing up for us and for each other. So I'll just say until next time, we invite you to think about how are you going to make room? How will you make room with us? And we're so grateful for your partnership and being here along the journey.
We invite you to continue making room with us. You'll find this episode and all of our exciting and meaningful conversations on Apple, Spotify, or really anywhere you choose to listen to podcasts.
Join the Making Room movement and get more info at makingroomwithus.com or follow us on Instagram at Making Room With Us.
Thank you for showing up for us and each other. Until next time.
You are wonderful and full of truth, just as you are. You are wonderful, so full of truth, just as you are. You are wonderful, so full of truth, just as you are, just as you are. You're welcome here, just as you are.